The desert held its breath. Rachel Morrison crouched low behind a thicket of sagebrush, her elbows resting on sun-baked rock, Nikon lens pointed at a distant Mustang herd. The air shimmered with heat, and her breath caught as she adjusted the focus. Perfect light. Perfect stillness. She whispered into her recorder, Calico Mountains. Wild herd, 14 total. Stallion, dominant, deep bay with blaze. 2 mares nursing, 1 foal, paint, maybe 3 months. She paused, her voice softer. Reminds me of Yellowstone. First time I ever held a camera, kneeling beside Dad, that same rush of being small but part of something massive. The foal caught her eye again, a striking black and white paint trailing a bit from the others. Curious little thing. She watched him nibble a weed, ears flicking at flies. She smiled. You're trouble already, huh? Then stillness. Not the quiet kind, but the kind that steals sound. A hawk that had been circling vanished mid-screech. The mare nearest the foal stopped grazing and raised her head sharply, ears pivoting. Rachel's gut clenched. Even the wind had paused, the kind of silence nature made when it was holding its breath. She adjusted her zoom, panned left. Movement, slow, too low to be a coyote, too smooth to be anything from this part of Nevada. What the hell? At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks, but no, it was real. Her heart dropped into her stomach. A python. Massive. At least 18 feet long, thick as her thigh, gliding through the scrub like it owned the place. Its skin shimmered with unnatural moisture, wet against the bone-dry landscape. It looked like a nightmare that had slithered out of the Everglades and into the wrong world. Not just out of place, wrong in every way. Rachel's breath turned to vapor in her throat. Burmese pythons didn't belong here. They belonged to the swamps of Southeast Asia, maybe southern Florida at worst. Not Nevada, not here. This had to be an exotic pet. Dumped, thriving, and now hunting prey that had no evolutionary defense against it. The foal, alone, still grazing. The python's head lifted, triangular, eyes cold, jaws hinged wide. Rachel froze, camera still in her hands. Her mind screamed, "You're here to observe, not interfere, that's the rule." But her body said something else. A memory flashed, Montana, years ago. A fox caught in a trap she was too late to stop. Its eyes haunted her every time she closed her own. That day she'd sworn never again. The python lunged. The foal let out a high-pitched scream, raw, full of terror, as the coils snapped around its front legs. Rachel ran. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just dropped her gear and sprinted across the rocky terrain, snatching up a thick splintered branch as she ran. "Hey!" she shouted. "Get away from him!" The python tightened, dragging the foal down. Its body twitched in panic, legs kicking wildly. Dust flew. Blood bloomed near its flank. Rachel swung the branch like a club, striking the python's side. The sound, meaty, dull, wasn't nearly satisfying enough. The snake hissed, loosening slightly, its coils readjusting. The foal screamed again, its breath ragged now, thin. Rachel could feel it. Life slipping. "Hang on, baby," she whispered. "You fight." She struck again, harder. The snake turned on her this time. Its thick head reared back, jaws gaping. It struck fast. Missed by inches as Rachel threw herself backward, scraping her elbow on stone. The foal managed to wriggle free, barely, but collapsed, legs trembling violently. Its breathing was fast, erratic. Rachel crawled to its side. The foal's breathing was ragged. She whispered into her recorder, almost out of habit. His tiny chest rising and falling too quickly. I put my hand on his side, and felt how close he was to fading out. The python regrouped. Its eyes locked on her now, deciding she was the real threat. Rachel rose, gripping the branch like a spear, every instinct screaming for her to run. But she didn't. She stepped in front of the foal. If this thing kills me, fine. But it won't get him too. Then thunder. Not from the sky, from the ground, hooves, dozens. The stallion came first, guardian, charging with the fury of a storm god. His hooves slammed into the python's back like sledgehammers. Again and again. The snake recoiled, coiled, hissed, but the horse didn't flinch. Guardian reared up, landing a crushing blow, and the python finally retreated, blood streaking its scales as it vanished into the brush. Silence fell. Dust hung thick in the air. Rachel staggered, then froze again. The herd had surrounded her. Mares, foals, a wall of muscle and eyes and wildness. But none of them moved to drive her away. Instead, Grace, the foal's mother, stepped forward. Her body tense, then softened. She lowered her head, nudged Rachel's shoulder gently. Rachel blinked, throat thick. "You're thanking me?" Then Guardian approached. He stared at her, not with the wild suspicion of a feral animal, but with something older, a recognition. As if he'd been watching all along, as if this moment had already been decided. He exhaled sharply through his nostrils, then, ever so gently, touched his muzzle to Rachel's chest. Her breath caught. They were accepting her. She looked down at the foal, bloodied, breathing, but alive. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. Atop the ridge, a black SUV sat parked like a vulture. Inside, Logan Pierce, CEO of Pierce Western Industries, swirled whiskey in a thermos and muttered, "Well, this just got complicated." His assistant shifted uneasily. "Should we call Fish and Wildlife?" "Hell no," Logan growled. "We've got that federal grazing contract locked in. This land's getting cleared for extraction before fall. One tourist with a camera isn't going to stop progress." He leaned forward. "Start calling the haulers. And tell Jose we may need those trailers prepped for live loads sooner than planned. If we push the wild ones out quietly, straight south over the border, there's good money waiting in Sonora." Back in the basin, Rachel knelt beside the trembling foal, cradling his head as Guardian stood watch beside her. She had no idea the storm that was coming, but the desert had chosen her now, and nature never chose lightly. Dawn broke slow over the desert, the sky bleeding pale gold over the Calico Mountains. Rachel hadn't slept. Her back ached from the hard ground, her skin dry and caked in dust, but her eyes stayed on the foal curled beside her, still breathing, still alive. She'd named him Brave, quietly, sometime between midnight and the coldest hour before sunrise. Now, as the first light spilled across the basin, Brave stirred. His legs twitched, one kicking weakly in the sand. Rachel placed a gentle hand on his side. The trembling was still there, but less frantic. He was fighting. Grace, the mare, stepped closer and let out a low, throaty nicker. Her breath warmed Rachel's cheek as she leaned in. Not threatening, not testing, just present. Then she touched her nose lightly to Rachel's forehead. It felt like a blessing. Guardian watched from a distance, his body a statue against the morning sun. Every now and then he flicked an ear, scanning the horizon. Rachel noticed how the herd mirrored his stillness, as if waiting on his cue. She understood something then. She'd been accepted, yes, but this was no accident. She hadn't stumbled into their trust. She'd been invited. Later that morning, she heard the rumble of an engine, far off, just beyond the ridge. Not close enough to alarm the herd, but enough to twist her gut. The world beyond this basin was waking up, and it would come knocking soon. By midday, Rachel had coaxed Brave into standing, unsteady, trembling, but on his own feet. Grace remained close, guiding her foal with subtle shifts of her body. Rachel walked beside them, careful not to touch, but present. The sun was high when she heard the crunch of footsteps, human ones. She turned sharply, heart thudding. Out from the shadow of the rock wall came a young man, maybe 22, dusty ball cap tilted back on a mop of sweat-damp hair. A camera dangled around his neck. "Whoa," he said, hands raised. "Didn't mean to spook you. I'm Evan Shaw, from National Geo's internship program." Rachel blinked, confused. "I was sent to shadow you," he added. "But you were off-grid for 3 days, so I came out looking. GPS pinged your camp, but..." His eyes landed on Brave, on Guardian, then on the wall of wild horses, standing eerily still behind them. "Oh," he said. "Holy sh..." "Don't move," Rachel cut in. "And definitely don't take a picture right now." Evan froze. "I'm guessing you haven't been around wild herds much." No, not up close," he admitted. "This is insane. They're just letting you be here?" Rachel nodded. "It's complicated." They sat later beneath the shade of a large cottonwood. Rachel shared water and pieces of a protein bar. Evan, still wide-eyed, couldn't stop glancing toward Brave. "What happened to the little guy?" "Python," Rachel said quietly. Evan nearly choked. "A python? Here? That's not even... How?" She gave him the short version. He was quiet after that. "You didn't film it?" he asked, finally. Rachel shook her head. "Didn't have time. Some things matter more than footage." He studied her, genuinely trying to understand. "You broke every protocol in the handbook." "I know." "That's badass." She gave a small smile. "I didn't feel badass, I felt desperate." From across the clearing, Guardian watched the two humans. His tail flicked once. Grace grazed nearby, always keeping one eye on Brave and on Rachel. The afternoon brought another visitor. This time, not from the magazine. An old truck rumbled down the dirt road, tires crunching over loose gravel. Evan stood, but Rachel held out a hand. "It's okay." The door opened slowly, and a man stepped out. He was in his late 60s, maybe early 70s, with long gray hair tied back in a braid and skin leathered by years of sun. His boots were worn, but polished. Around his neck hung a small pouch made of deerskin and beads. Rachel recognized him before he spoke. "Kai Redhawk," she said. "You're with the Tribal Lands Office." He gave a soft nod. "My niece works at the ranger station. She heard about the white woman sleeping with the Mustangs and figured I'd want to see for myself." He looked past her, toward Guardian and the others. His expression shifted, something between awe and deep respect. She was right. Kai stepped carefully toward Brave, then lowered himself to one knee. He didn't touch the foal, he just watched him. The moment hung heavy. "Do you know what they're doing?" he asked Rachel without looking at her. She swallowed. "They're protecting him. And you," Kai said softly. "You've been chosen." Rachel frowned. "Chosen?" Kai looked up. "There's a story. From long before BLM maps and mining leases, the old ones believed that sometimes, in moments of imbalance, the wild would call for a guardian. Not someone who tames, but someone who listens. The horses would choose that person." "That sounds like legend." "Most truths do," Kai said. Then he stood, eyes warm but serious. "And now you carry their trust. That's heavier than it sounds." As dusk settled over the basin, Rachel sat between Grace and Brave. Evan snapped quiet photos from a distance, the herd no longer unsettled by his presence. Kai knelt in the dirt beside Guardian, whispering something too soft to catch. Rachel stared at the foal's rising chest, his strength returning hour by hour. Then, for the first time since the attack, Brave turned and nuzzled against her leg. Not out of fear, but out of choice. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Somewhere in the shadows beyond the basin, headlights flickered. And in the back of a trailer labeled Pierce Western Supply, cages rattled quietly in the dark. The wind shifted on the third morning. Rachel noticed it first in the silence, how the usual soft rustle of sagebrush gave way to something heavier, charged. She stood on a ridge above the basin, her camera slung across her shoulder, though she hadn't raised it once. Below her, Guardian's herd grazed calmly. Brave was up and moving more each day, though still limping slightly, his flank marked with darkened bruises that hadn't yet faded. Grace never left his side. Evan walked up beside her, holding a battered field notebook, still scribbling names and markings, trying to memorize herd structure. His tone had changed in just a few days. Less tourist, more reverent. "They've shifted their pattern," Rachel said quietly, pointing toward the eastern edge of the clearing. The horses had begun to gather in tighter formations. Mares stood shoulder to shoulder. Guardian had trotted ahead, head high, scanning the horizon. Something was coming. A rumble echoed through the hills, not mechanical, rhythmic, deep. "More Mustangs," Rachel murmured, her heart skipping. Moments later, the first shapes emerged over the rise. Another herd, then another, and another. In less than an hour, 5 separate wild Mustang herds surrounded the basin. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. This isn't real. Kai Redhawk arrived not long after, his old truck trailing dust. He stepped out slowly, face unreadable. "This is what I was afraid of," he said softly. "Afraid?" Evan asked, confused. Kai didn't answer immediately. He walked out toward the center of the basin as the herds approached. "They don't gather like this," he finally said, "not unless something's broken or changing." The new herds didn't challenge Guardian. No squealing, no kicking. Instead, the lead stallions moved with careful precision, approaching not him, but Rachel. She stood still as the first stallion stopped 10 feet away. He was dapple gray with a long scar down his neck. He sniffed the air, then took a single step closer. Another. Then he dipped his head, slowly, deliberately, and let out a soft breath. "Jesus," Evan whispered. "He's greeting you." One by one, the stallions came forward, not aggressive, not territorial. Each seemed to be performing the same ritual, assessing, observing, then showing acceptance. Even the foals wandered forward, some brushing against her fingers, some simply watching. But the most surprising moment came when Brave stepped up beside her, lifting his head and letting out a short, proud nicker. The other horses responded. That was the moment the herd shifted. No longer separated, no longer fragmented. They moved together, one massive, flowing sea of motion, and Rachel stood at the center of it all. Kai knelt again, whispering words in his native tongue. Then he stood and spoke quietly, but clearly, to the humans present. "This is ceremony, not for show, not for study. This is the passing of something old into something new." Rachel barely heard him. She could feel it, beneath her feet, in her chest. The herds weren't just welcoming her, they were entrusting her. At dusk, a storm gathered on the far horizon. Lightning forked silently, painting streaks across the darkening sky, but the horses remained close, tighter than ever. Evan sat cross-legged in the dirt, recording audio. "This is wild. It's like every rule's being rewritten." Rachel crouched beside Brave, running her fingers gently along his mane. His breathing was steady now, his weight firmer beneath her palm. "You brought them here. she whispered. Across the ridge, a fourth vehicle arrived. A dark SUV, government plates. Rachel tensed. Two men stepped out, one in Bureau of Land Management uniform, the other in a designer jacket and aviator sunglasses. Logan Pierce. She stood slowly, dust clinging to her jeans. "Well," Logan drawled, stepping forward. "Didn't expect a full reunion of the freak parade, but here we are." Kai moved to block him. "This land isn't yours." "Yet," Logan replied with a smirk. "But give it a few weeks, contracts already in draft. Mining permits getting fast-tracked thanks to that little wildfire last year. BLM just needs to confirm the herds are clear." His eyes landed on Rachel. "You're kind of ruining that plan." She said nothing. "Oh, don't get noble on me now. We both know those horses won't last the year out here, not without containment. Better to make it clean, quick sale, quiet export." Rachel's stomach twisted. "Export? To Mexico?" Logan said casually. "Meat market doesn't ask questions. Pays up front." She took a step forward. "You'll have to go through me." Logan's smirk faded just slightly. "Oh, I plan to." His men turned back to the truck. "See you soon, sweetheart." And they were gone. The sun dipped below the ridge, casting the basin in gold. Rachel stood alone in the fading light, the weight of every gaze, horse and human, settling on her shoulders. Guardian stepped beside her and exhaled, his breath warm on her cheek. "You saw that?" she whispered. He didn't move. But somehow she knew he had, and more importantly, he remembered. The wind blew hot and wrong. It wasn't just the dry crackle of August heat. It was the way the air carried no scent, no birdsong, no movement, just a heavy silence, like the earth itself had tensed for impact. Rachel stood at the edge of the basin, her hand resting on Brave's withers. He was stronger now, nearly steady on all fours, taller too. Guardian loomed just behind them, ears pivoting, eyes fixed on the northern horizon. Something was coming, and it wasn't human. A low rumble built in the distance. Not hooves this time, but thunder without the rain. Rachel's nose caught it first. Smoke. She turned. A thin black ribbon of it slithered up the sky behind the ridge. "Wildfire," she whispered. Evan appeared at her side, sweat streaking his face. The winds shifted. Kai's checking the far side. Says we've got maybe an hour, 2 max, before it hits the lower basin. Rachel's heart clenched. That's not enough time. "There's a canyon to the east," Evan said, flipping open a folded topographic map. "Natural stone breaks, a water runoff gully plus elevation. If we move now—" Rachel shook her head. "We're not just moving people." He looked up, sobering. Dozens of horses grazed calmly nearby. Some rested. Some bathed in the creek. Brave nuzzled her elbow, unaware of the threat. Guardian paced restlessly now, nickering low to his mares. "They feel it," she said. She didn't wait. She grabbed her sat phone, keyed into the emergency frequency. "This is Morrison, Calico Herd Cluster, wildfire confirmed, North Ridge. We need aerial surveillance and ground support. Multiple herds present, human and animal evac required." Silence, then static. Then a clipped voice from a fire ops dispatcher. "Copy that, Morrison. You've got smoke jumpers en route, but gridlock near Route 89. Don't count on vehicles. Get moving if you can." She dropped the radio. "Call them," she told Evan. "All of them. Anyone you trust. Tell them we've got 40 minutes to move an entire ecosystem." Evan was already dialing, but they both knew some things couldn't be saved with speed. Guardian reared back, whinnying loud and sharp. The herd snapped into motion. It was like watching an orchestra, chaotic but precise. Mares gathered foals. Young stallions flanked the edges. Brave stood frozen for a moment, then bolted, straight toward the ridge trail, toward the fire. "Brave!" Rachel shouted, sprinting after him. She cleared the scrub fast, boots sliding on loose rock. Smoke curled over the top of the hill now, thick and orange. Brave's dark form disappeared over the crest. Rachel's lungs burned. Her legs pumped harder. She reached the top and froze. Brave wasn't alone. A small foal, tiny, barely old enough to stand, was tangled in brush on the downhill slope. Brave had wedged his body between the baby and the rising smoke, pushing with his chest, trying to get her loose. Oh, God! Rachel scrambled down, slicing her palms on the thorns. The baby's legs were twisted in barbed wire. Old fencing, forgotten and rusted. "Hold on, little one," she breathed. Brave turned to her, chest heaving, ash clinging to his coat. She met his eyes, wide, frantic, but not with fear, with determination. He wouldn't leave her. Rachel reached into her back pocket, pulled the multi-tool she always carried. Her fingers slipped twice on the wire. The heat grew worse, the smoke thicker. At last, the final strand snapped. The foal stumbled free. Rachel grabbed Brave's halter instinctively, then stopped. She didn't need to pull. He was already turning, urging the little one forward with his shoulder. They climbed together, step by step, into the dying sun. When they cleared the ridge, the world exploded. The sky was fire. The valley below glowed with fleeing shadows, horses stampeding in an organized, desperate arc. Guardian led them through a dry wash toward the canyon Evan had mapped. Kai stood on a boulder, waving his hat, yelling directions as volunteers herded stragglers through a narrow cut. Rachel, coughing now, pushed Brave and the foal toward the path. She staggered. Then she heard it. Engines. From the western ridge, a caravan of black trucks rolled in. Trailers rattled. Spotlights beamed through the smoke. At their head, Logan Pierce. "What the hell?" Rachel growled. Pierce stood atop the cab of his truck, megaphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he bellowed, "evacuation orders are in effect. We'll assist the removal of all livestock. Load 'em up. Clean, efficient, no mess." His men opened trailer gates. "These aren't livestock," Rachel shouted. "They're wild. They're not yours." Pierce smirked. "They're standing on federal land in a fire zone, which makes them salvageable assets." Gunshots cracked, warning shots into the air. The herds panicked. Guardian reared, screaming. Rachel saw the trap instantly. The fire had driven the horses straight into a bottleneck, funneled between flame and trucks. "No," she muttered. "You don't get to do this." She whistled, sharp, 2 notes. The same sound Grace used when calling Brave. Guardian turned. So did Brave. They looked to her, and they trusted her. She ran, waving her arms, her whole body wide. "Back! Go back! South side! Move!" Kai joined her, beating a branch on the ground, shouting in his native tongue. Evan ran in from the canyon, eyes wide, hands streaked with soot. "There's another path, the riverbed. If we drop down now, they'll follow." Rachel spun, pointed, and Brave moved. With a cry, he galloped past her, stronger than he'd ever looked, leading the herd behind him. One by one, they turned. Guardian stayed last. The stallion stared down the headlights, the sound of trailer gates slamming, the men with ropes and threats and cash on their minds. Then he turned to Rachel, their eyes locked, and he charged back into the canyon. Pierce's voice rose behind them. "You'll regret this. You hear me? You'll lose everything." Rachel didn't answer. She just ran. She ran with the herd until her lungs gave out, and her legs buckled, and the sky opened up with ash and smoke and noise. When it was over, she found herself lying on the canyon floor, Brave pressed against her side, his body hot and trembling, but safe. And above them, Guardian stood on the ridge, silhouetted by fire, unmoving, watching. Then, with one last cry, he turned and disappeared into the smoke. 6 months later, snow dusted the low ridges of the Calico Mountains, painting the desert in strokes of white and gold. The air was clean now, quiet. Even the wind had softened, as if the land itself had exhaled. Rachel stood at the edge of a new clearing, surveying the half-finished shelter that would soon house supplies for full rehabilitation. Beyond the structure, horses grazed freely across the winter-dried basin. There were fewer now, but the herd had grown stronger, tighter, wiser. At the center of it all stood Brave, taller, solid, his once fragile legs now powerful and sure. He moved with confidence, ears high, gaze steady. He had taken Guardian's place, not by force, but by quiet assumption. The other horses followed him because he never needed to dominate. He simply led. Rachel smiled faintly. You grew into your name. Behind her, Evan was hammering planks into a fence post. The irrigation line's finally holding, he said between grunts. We might actually get spring grass to take root this year. He wiped his brow and looked toward the herd. Grace is teaching that new mare how to keep her foal close. You see that? Rachel nodded. She's mentoring, same way she taught me. From behind the barn came the low rumble of Kai's old truck. He stepped out with a blanket over one shoulder and a bundle of sage in his hands. His breath fogged in the cold air. Ceremony tonight? Evan asked, half joking. Kai smiled. Tonight is for remembering. They built the fire near the creek, the one Guardian had used to water his herd. As the flames climbed into the darkening sky, the horses gathered nearby, not out of command, but as if drawn by something older than language. Rachel placed a small carved wooden figure into the flames, a stallion, chiseled from red cedar. Guardian gave everything, she said softly. He didn't run from danger. He turned toward it. Kai nodded. In the old ways, that means his spirit watches over the land now. He's not gone. He's just changed form. Rachel sat on a smooth rock near the fire, Brave standing beside her, his coat catching the firelight. Around them, foals nickered softly, tails swishing, ears twitching at the snapping logs. It had taken months, but the world had started to notice. Her footage, along with Evan's, had gone viral. A wild stallion saving a photographer, a foal learning to lead, Mustang herds gathering in unprecedented numbers. The public had rallied. More importantly, so had the science. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had returned with a formal delegation from the National Wild Horse Research Institute. After weeks of study, they published a groundbreaking paper citing Rachel's integration as the first confirmed case of cross-species herd inclusion behavior in wild equines. It sparked a national conversation. Logan Pierce's mining contract collapsed under public scrutiny. The footage of him trying to forcefully evacuate the herds during a wildfire, guns, trailers, threats, sparked outrage. Rachel didn't even need to testify. The images spoke for themselves. The land was granted protected status 2 months later. And Rachel? She was named the first official Wild Mustang liaison for the Western region. It was a title she never asked for, but it fit. She spent her days splitting time between the open range and meetings with wildlife officers, ranchers, and conservationists. She helped draft policy, rewrite protocol, and bridge the impossible gap between human ambition and wild preservation. And Brave was always with her. At public events he stood like a sentinel, eyes calm, never flinching, even among crowds. Children could approach him. Veterans with PTSD visited and swore his presence alone brought peace. He had become a symbol, yes, but more than that, a reminder of what was possible when compassion overrode fear. Rachel walked the edges of the sanctuary at dusk, watching Brave herd 3 younger foals through a narrow trail. One tripped, and Brave stopped, waited, then nudged the little one up with his nose. "You're your mother's patience and your father's courage," Rachel whispered. Evan caught up with her near the paddock fence. "We got final word. The grant came through. Funding's in for the northern pasture expansion." Rachel smiled. "Good. They'll need it come spring." He hesitated. "There's talk about duplicating the program in Wyoming, Arizona. They want someone to train the teams. Model your approach." Rachel turned back toward the valley. The horses glowed in the last light. "Maybe. Someday. But not now." She shook her head. "This isn't done yet. I'm not done yet." Later that night, under a sky so clear the stars felt close enough to touch, she sat in the grass, her harmonica cradled in her hands. She hadn't played in months, not since Guardian. She brought it to her lips and played, not for a crowd, not for a camera, just a low, wandering melody. A lullaby without words. The horses stirred. Grace lifted her head. Brave stepped forward, ears pricked. He walked to her side, lowered his head, and rested it gently on her shoulder. She didn't cry, not this time. Instead, she leaned into him, whispering, "You're not just a survivor, Brave. You're what comes after survival." She looked to the horizon, and there, across the ridge, silhouetted in moonlight, a small group of foals broke away from the main herd. Brave turned toward them, then back to her. Rachel rose, brushing dust from her jeans. "Go," she said softly. Brave let out one low nicker, then trotted off to join the young ones. He led them into the hills, slow, patient, sure, not to leave, but to begin again. Rachel stood at the edge of the firelight, hands in her pockets, watching them fade into the dark. A smile tugged at her lips. The circle never ends, she thought. And for once, the silence around her felt like peace.